It's 10 o'clock. Great. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on a very sunny Friday morning, which is fantastic. This is our fireside chat with University of the Arts London today. Their admissions function and has been restructured recently, and we've been doing some work with them to help them get to the crux of their processes, what's going on, what they want to go on, how they want to improve and get better. And it's been a fantastic project, and we thought that they have lots and lots of good experience to share. So they've very kindly agreed to join us for this fireside chat this morning. And I'm absolutely delighted to introduce to you Helen Anderson, who's the Director of Student Marketing and Recruitment and Admissions. Helen, do you just want to give yourself a little intro there?
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Helen Anderson. I'm the Director of what is now Student Marketing, Recruitment and Admissions. So we've recently converged admissions with marketing and recruitment. And yeah, my background is largely in the education sector, previously an academic many years ago, and specialising in arts, because obviously the University of the Arts London is predominantly arts and design, but in both international marketing, recruitment and admissions and UK for the last 20 years. I hate to say it, but so yeah, I've got quite a lot of experience. I've been with the University of the Arts for about 9 years now, and we've made quite a few changes in that time. So.
Wonderful, thank you, Helen. And also Kath MacLeod, who's Deputy Director of Student Marketing and Recruitment at University of the Arts London.
Hi everyone, nice to electronically meet you all. Yes, I've worked with Helen since 2014 in the Student Marketing and Recruitment function, obviously now being expanded to take on our admissions team. And I come from a background of international recruitment, similarly to Helen, worked at University of Hertfordshire, previously Queen's Belfast, University of Manchester in international recruitment, and then when I came to UAL took on a broader student recruitment remit and now look after the prospective student engagement, marketing and content and UK and international recruitment teams, and over the next few months admissions will join that grouping. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you, Kath, and welcome. And also our very own Melody Ascari, Principal Director for Higher Education. Welcome, Melody.
Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. So, hello, my name's Melody. I'm one of the principal consultants here at Equantiis, and I have been in higher education for most of my professional career in one form or another, and I've worked both on frontline services, delivering admissions through to graduation, and then moved over into developing and delivering student information systems, and then a hop over to Equantiis, where I've sort of amalgamated the two series of experiences to help support other institutions make informed decisions about strategy, technology, automation, process optimization and efficiency. So a number of things across a sort of broad spectrum in higher education. And I'm delighted to be here with both Kath and Helen, who we've worked with really closely over the last couple of months, and it's been a great project. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Wonderful, thank you. And I just popped a little note in the chat there. Please do feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself or make any comments as we go through. And also we're going to be using the Q&A functionality in Zoom. So if you have a question to post to our panel or you want them to elaborate a bit on something, please do pop that in, and we'll try and make time for that at the end too. Okay, so in this world of 2022, post-Brexit, post-COVID environment, and in light of those ongoing geopolitical and economic instability in which we all find ourselves, Helen, I just thought I'd come to you first to ask, as well as that rich mix there, what do you think the kind of major challenges and opportunities are facing institutes at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Ginny. I mean, I think one of the biggest problems that we're facing, and I think we'll continue to face because the demographics are going to change, is the growth in the volume of applications that we're seeing and how we deal with that. And certainly in the last 5 years, we've seen quite a lot of exponential growth at UAL, probably to the tune of about 15 to 20% every year, which for us is somewhere in the region of about 5,000 to 10,000 students more every year. A lot of it is predominantly postgraduate and international, which I'm sure everybody has been experiencing the same. But we're starting now to see the UK demographic upturn, which we were all predicting. And certainly we also have a large proportion of preparatory courses. So we are seeing volume growth, and I think that is a big challenge in terms of how we transform our services, and certainly use digital and technology to help us with that. I'm sure we're all probably using a similar student record system. I'm not sure if I can name that, but you know, that's a challenge in its own right. But I think the second part of that, which obviously that volume creates a lot of additional work, particularly for admissions, but also I think we need to improve the service and quality to meet that demand from students, because they want a faster turnaround. You know, Gen Z students want, you know, a higher level of service. They want you to serve them for longer hours, 24/7, and they want instant, you know, gratification when they come to you with an inquiry. And I think that that's certainly some of the things that we have found most challenging. I mean, notwithstanding diversity and fairness and equality and selection and really big stuff, but the customer service, I think, is at the heart of what we are trying to improve in transforming our services. So that's probably our biggest challenge, I think, at the moment. That doesn't sound like the biggest challenge, because obviously diversity is key as well. And depending on university strategies, we are selecting in many areas, but still recruiting in some. But when we're selecting, then it becomes quite a challenge for equality and diversity. And then you put volume on top of that, then customer service, you know, student first approach starts to become more and more challenging if your services, I'll just call them services, but your systems, your processes and your culture are perhaps not quite attuned to that very, I think, almost private sector level benchmark, dare I say it. That education sometimes is a little bit of a dinosaur depending on the university, but and people are a little bit entrenched sometimes, and it's often that's too businessy, it's not educational enough. So I think some of those challenges as well are what we've been looking at over the last few years.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, Melody and I have been working with a client recently who has the word business in their function or title, but felt really uncomfortable with us referring to them as a business, which we often find. Melody, your thoughts on the challenges facing higher education at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, Helen is, you know, she's absolutely right. There is a real turnaround in terms of UK applicants coming back to the table, plus a massive increase in the international applications coming through as well. And let's face it, you know, I think institutions did an incredible job of adjusting their technologies, managing to deliver remotely because of COVID, and really transferring a lot of stuff. But I think also what that's done is brought to light that actually we're dealing with really legacy technology, legacy operations, legacy systems, legacy processes that came under significant pressure and just don't marry up with the volume that comes through institutions these days. Actually, they were designed you know, at the forefront, probably at the time when they came in, where you sort of started to develop them, but they just can't manage the amount of applications and the amount of students and the service that we expect to give. Helen's, you know, she's absolutely right. The generation of applicants and students that come through HE at the moment, they expect instant gratification. They expect a service that is on par with what they have in their private lives, where you can log on to something and something is really efficient and everything you need is there, and you have an account for everything, and you know, and you have a central point of information and a source of truth. So it's an interesting time for higher education, I think, in terms of a reconciliation and a redefinition of themselves as a sector, so that they can then engage with the future market for sure.
And Kath, in addition to what we've heard from Melody and Helen there, from your point of view, how have these challenges been affecting either your teams or UAL specifically?
Well, I think that the result of this volume, particularly around international, that we've seen, and as you say, the kind of fact that we've got legacy processes in place that haven't caught up with that exponential growth, is that we see staff that are really demotivated in some instances because they're being asked to carry out an almost impossible workload, sort of, you know, getting up really early, trying to get ahead of the game, trying to get those applications through the system, and just it's kind of a never-ending mountain that they're trying to get through using technology that's not quite fit for purpose and processes that are from a period when we had maybe half of the applications or less than we do now. So that's really tough, and we're going to come on to this a bit later, I'm sure, but that's when you start to think, okay, you know, this is a bit broken now, this isn't working, the staff are struggling, we can't relieve the workload because I heard it described at another external event yesterday, and I think this is common to universities, not just in the UK but in other countries as well. We're not in control of the demand pipeline that's coming into us, and because universities are not particularly flexible in how we deploy resource to solve some of those problems, we have admissions teams at the same size as they were when we had, you know, a tiny proportion of the applications that we're receiving now, and we can't easily put investment in to resolve that from a people point of view. And also technologically, we have a huge system implementation project with our student record system in 2018, and there's, you know, that's almost considered, you know, that job was done then, and the resource in terms of responding to the ongoing business improvement needs that we identify as the volume grows, it's not quick to resolve some of those issues. So again, that then impacts down on the staff that are there on the front line trying to deal with this volume of applications coming in, and also, as Helen touched on, the volume of questions that students are trying to ask about their application, because it's taken a while for them to hear back from us because of this volume issue. So we're sort of stuck in a kind of hamster wheel of volume and trying to get through that and not being able to get head above the parapet to look at the process issues and try and resolve some of them.
Yeah,
thanks. Sorry, Melody.
I was just to say that's such a challenge, isn't it? That building enough time, quite often, you know, most institutions, actually all the institutions without fail that we work with, always say we don't have time. We know there's a problem. We know we can't. We know we need to change something. We just don't have time to stick our heads above the parapet and understand what's going on so that we can make a change. And interesting, there's a comment in the chat as well from Rob Tucker who said actually, you know, I remember being frontline operational, actually your main intakes were September. So your main intake for your students was September, and you might have a very small postgraduate intake in January and an even smaller maybe PhD intake at the beginning of the summer ready for September. But actually there is now year-round admissions with multiple intakes, with multiple versions, with hybrid and online and on campus. And actually, so the pressure is always on, right? You're never off now. You never have a chance to do that activity where you think, okay, admissions are done for the year a little bit. We've got 2 months. Let's just sort some stuff out before we get going again. That opportunity now is not possible, I think, for quite a lot of institutions.
Absolutely.
Is it worth just adding to that we're looking at new types of products as well? So a part of our university strategy is to look at our online offer and start developing that. And I know Helen's been very closely involved in those discussions, and I'm sure we'll have more to say on this, but we're looking at another kind of something else coming into the equation now, which is okay, these online courses might not be fit with the traditional recruitment and admission cycles that we're all used to working. They could be shorter, they could be, you know, something you could apply to at any point during the year. And when we come on to talk about the reasons for doing this piece of work, that's another part of it as well. Like, how do we move away from there just being one type of product and be ready as an admissions and recruitment service or department to respond to being flexible enough to deal with the applications for these different and new products?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've heard, I'm listening with interest about the impossible workloads for staff and volume growth. And Helen, we've already spoken about students as kind of customers. So what do you think it is now that applicants are looking for in their university choices?
That's a good question.
Well, customer service obviously is key, and I think, you know, when they compare what other sorts of customer service they can have from other sectors, I think they want at least to be able to match that. And it's not acceptable for universities just to be dinosaurs anymore. You know, we've got to compete. And it's interesting with the online and private sector and short course online, they are so slick. You know, when you look at their websites, when you look at their tech, they are brilliant. You know, people like Coursera and Future Learn, some of the big American companies, they're on it, and they're selling. You know, it has become, and this is, I think, the thing is the shift of culture between selling and educating. And we have issues around calling it product and calling them customers. You know, still. And that, I think, is the cultural shift that we really need to make within universities to try to see it like that. And we're still challenged quite a lot from the academic community about using word like products for courses. But yeah, I've gone a little bit off track. Sorry, Janine. I'll go back to the question again. It was specific to, did you ask about challenges of?
I was thinking about our students as customers and what they might be looking for when they're, you know, considering and then selecting and then making their choice and then coming to you for those first interactions, actually, you know, through the application process, interviews, you know, having portfolios, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, it's kind of a potentially a double question, because depends if you're talking about what kind of subjects and courses you're offering as to what do students want, or what kind of service do they want when they are engaging with you. So I suppose I answered the first part of that question by they want 24/7. They, you know, admissions and inquiries needs to be rolling and always on, you know, and that's where I think we need to get to. So I think we're looking at how we can automate a lot of information to be able to, students can self-serve a lot more easily. And I know a lot of universities already do this. And I think that's the kind of approach we need to take to that sort of customer service, so they can get information quickly, any time of day, and they can self-serve. And then when they need more intensive interaction, then you can use other channels like, you know, email or chat or whatever, telephone, etc. And then students can start to have a dialogue. But they want the highest level of customer service possible, and they want it fast, and they want it to be turned around. They're not prepared to wait even half a day, you know, which when you've got 20,000 applications and you're trying to run through them in a cycle, and you're resourced in that way, and you've got a fairly kind of old process, you're just not going to be able to respond to that need. And I think that's a huge challenge. But they also want detailed information, you know, and it's got to be clear and it's got to be available. So they want to know, what jobs can I get? You know, what is this course going to do for me? How many hours am I going to get taught? You know, they want real detail, understandably. And I think, you know, universities have not necessarily been in that cultural kind of framework because they haven't really been in a selling mindset. And I think that's the difference. And selling is a bit of a dirty word, you know, marketing and selling, you know, I'm sure others have, you know, these experiences as well. And it's about how do we find the balance between that sort of academia and education, and recognise that we are selling a product here and it's highly competitive. And when you get into the online mode, it's even more competitive, you know, and I think universities at the moment, they've got their brands and that's great. And they've got their educational kudos, but they need the customer service if they're going to compete.
Yeah.
I think that's really what students want from all levels, whatever type of student they are, whether they're a professional or an 18-year-old or a short course type of student.
Kath, what is it that you think students are looking for? Is it sort of transferable skills, all about employability when they graduate? Is it, you know, lifelong learning or hybrid study? What do you think students are looking for right now?
I think certainly in the time I've worked in HE, we've seen that shift away from, you know, education for education's sake to return on investment on my fees. Of course, that's a natural consequence of what has happened with the UK student funding model. And of course, the international students were always paying their fees and always, you know, wanted that return on investment from that much higher fee that was set. So absolutely key that, you know, they get that job, that sort of future aspirational kind of direction that they wanted to get out of coming to the university. And obviously that's a key pressure now on the sector from government policy as well, as they look to kind of address the challenges around this high participation in HE. So I think we all have to be aware that that's the landscape in which we're operating now, that we have to show that it's worth it for students to put this investment in. But interestingly, I think that also brand and reputation are still absolutely critical to students. So, you know, you hear institutions talking about what they will do with students around employability, but that is kind of all those workshops and career support and all that is sort of trumped by a brand that is well known, and that where, you know, there's alumni or there's a long-standing history of educational excellence or research excellence and so on. So brand and reputation is still so important in our markets. And I think the interesting crossover for our work is the fact that reputation can be impacted by the way you do recruitment and admissions. And we see that a lot. You know, we see students talking on social media, students talking in groups amongst themselves about their experience of applying to the students going on the student room and talking about how long they've waited for an interview, and that's really not good for our reputation as which is otherwise attractive, you know. And we have got a great alumni, and we've got a great set of colleges, amazing reputations individually and as a whole, but it can be sort of tarnished really by a really poor applicant experience. So I think that's where we've got to think, what's our role in making sure that the university's brand and reputation is perceived positively in the prospective student audience. And schools is another thing worth mentioning as well, because schools can pick up on the negative experiences of their students who they're trying to help and trying to take to that next stage of their journey, and that can be passed on to the next cohort as well. So school counsellors as well is critical in that.
Kath, I think that nicely tees me up for a question to Helen about the kind of driving factors, both internal and external, Helen, that kind of led to the recognition that, you know, UAL kind of bravely thought, well, perhaps we need to make some changes.
Good question, because you usually make changes when you've got some kind of burning platform, and then it's usually a recruitment burning platform, right? So we are in quite a fortunate position in some quarters, not in all, but we are quite a selecting university for many of our courses. We're oversubscribed. And our challenge is diversity and making sure that fairness and equity in our selection processes and contextual admissions is absolutely at the front of what we do, and we're developing that. So that was one of the levers, but I think, I mean, just generally, we were not offering what I would consider to be a high enough level service, and we were getting perhaps not formal complaints, but there was a lot of noise, you know, as Kath mentioned, you know, it's not difficult to get a quick kind of storm on social media when something goes wrong, you know, and we had a few breaches as well with just the wrong kind of communications going out to students, just wasn't good enough. So all of those reasons sort of led us to look at, and of course the volume. I mean, a lot of the staff were demotivated, and one team put it on their knees. So, you know, there was a lot of issues that were kind of coming to the fore. Obviously, the student experience was suffering because of the volume. So I think we just started looking and analysing at why those problems were there. And of course, that led us to look at structures and processes in particular, but culture was another factor. That's a bit of a harder one to move on, but we're working on that too. So we were looking at our structures, finding them to be quite linear, quite siloed. We're a big university. We have, you know, various colleges, and we had different sort of siloed teams working in different colleges, and they weren't talking to each other that well. They were slightly competitive, and there was a lack of knowledge sharing as well. We also had some central teams, and people were very sort of prescribed with what they did, and didn't really want to be that agile about sharing some of that. And that was creating a problem. So we had a couple of sort of single points of failure going on. Indispensability, you know, especially in high areas, especially something like immigration. And so for all of those reasons, we bravely decided to completely restructure. And literally today is the end of my consultation period, in 4 weeks. But we took a long time to look at what we needed then in relation to, you know, all of what we just discussed, improving the student experience. But I mean, also, it's not just the service and quality of standards, but I think efficiency gains as well. Because one department might say, well, that's fine, just give us another 10 staff. well, that's just not going to happen. It's not a limitless bucket of resources that we can throw at this, and maybe just extra staff is not what we need. So then it was like, well, what about how we're doing things? What are our ways of working? How can we find efficiencies maybe there? Is there duplication of effort? And of course, once we really started to delve down, we could see that there were quite a few areas that were duplicated because of the siloed structure. And so everything started to fall out of that, really. And then we, started looking more at processes. And at that point, we decided to speak to Equantiis and ask for some help, because it was all getting quite confusing, to be honest. And that's only really happened in the last 6 months or so. So we're still in the process of making that work. We've done the why and the what, but now we have to do the how. And that will be quite challenging for us, because we are going to bring people together now from different cultures and different structures and try and make this work together. So there is going to be quite a lot of work to do in hearts and minds, and culture shift, which is all part of the issue as well. It's not just getting a new shiny system in, is it? And of course processes. So yeah, that's where we are at the moment. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Helen. Just thanks again. I'm sure people listening are appreciative of the fact that you and Kath have been very open and honest about the reasons for making the changes, and hopefully it will give people some comfort to know that we're not just talking about everything that goes right. Sometimes we're talking about challenges and why we need to make changes. In the chat, there's agreement about customer service being really important and kind of moving away from this sort of historical administration sort of function. And you talked there about matching those student needs with future state processes, and we've already talked a little bit about sort of technology challenges. I just wonder, Melody, in the chat, Tim's asked, how do you design those future state processes when you've got a very demanding customer service to deliver, but you've got these legacy systems that we've remained nameless at the moment, Helen, but you've got these legacy systems to sort of deal with. So, Helen and Melody, for UAL, I know that we did do some work where we started looking at future state, or helping the team to think about future state. So how can institutes go about tackling this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And there is no definitive answer here, and I think the conclusion that I've come to as I've worked with institutions over the last however many years is that there is a little bit of nuance, but essentially, I guess, let's face it, we have legacy student information systems and other systems that are in place that house a huge amount of student data. It's tricky to dig them out and put new ones in, and we've probably all had some experience of attempting that to varying levels of success. And when it's successful, it's great, but actually, it's a challenge because it's a central source of truth. And the downside to that is that they are dated. Sometimes they're on premise rather than cloud based. There are challenges around how they can actually deliver that next level customer service. So there is a challenge there that we have to navigate. And I guess the way that we have been addressing the situation is to do a combination of things, which is around really interrogating the process. So we go back to the beginning. What do you do? Why are you doing it like this? Could you do it like that? I'm going to ask you a question about why you're using a spreadsheet. Why is it not in the system? Even if your system is legacy, why are you still not able to get the information out? Is it, you need more resourcing to build it? Is it actually just simply doesn't exist? You're not collecting the data. So there's some questions around there. And then we do that sort of operational streamlining. Okay, let's just cut out the bits that we don't need and really make it effective and really make it as for UAL's case, it's this idea about centralizing or standardizing some of those disparate processes that run concurrently but in different departments or divisions. And then actually, if you're not in a position to dig out your student information system and put a new one in, sometimes it's about, okay, what other technology is there out there that can then help support some of the automation of those activities? Okay, so let's think about robotic process automation. So that you know, that bot can come in and just do that manual task. If you have 2 FTE doing the same thing every single day, which is just moving data from one place to another, maybe a bot can come in and do that activity, which means you are then freed up as a resource to deliver those, you know, that customer service to your applicant or to your student, which requires thinking and requires crafting of messaging, or, you know, responding in a slightly different way. So there are ways that you can sort of create a future process that utilizes what you have, but sort of add some other bits on top of it. So that's just one of the ways in which we work with institutions, or recommend, you know, that institutions consider using other technologies to support the delivery of a better and more effective customer service.
Great, thank you, Melody. Helen, you told us about what kind of led you to make the change. So can I ask you now then, what's the vision for the changes that you want to make?
Wow, yeah, I mean, you know, that's a big question in terms of where we are now. We have a vision in terms of the top line objectives around student first customer service. There is definitely the need, I think, to make efficiencies, but in a good way. I mean, like you're saying, making sure that people aren't doing labour intensive tasks repetitively, because that's actually, you know, quite demotivating as well. And how can we automate? How can we do things better, faster, and looking really at, you know, what works and what doesn't. So, you know, to Melody's points there, it is all about trying to find a better way to do the same thing, perhaps in a more efficient way, using technology, definitely. I mean, just one example, and it just feels like such a huge dinosaur, because I mean, Matt and I have worked at previous universities prior to UAL, but UAL is a particular case in point. But the inquiry piece, when we started looking at the inquiry model that was being used within the applicant teams, was just really quite disastrous in terms of multiple mailboxes, no real triaging or structure around sort of how we were dealing with those inquiries. And I mean, CRM is a massive part of this as well, and will help, you know, depending on what level universities are at with their CRMs. But again, you know, not being able to look at your insights, you know, what questions are being asked, are they being asked in a multiple way? Can you streamline that? Can you self-serve? Can you automate? Can you do FAQs? You know, I mean, just that in itself was quite a huge obvious gap in our service, and I think we came to that decision quite quickly. So we, you know, our vision is to try and streamline, is to try and automate where we can, dealing with volume, but also to make it quicker for our response back to students. I mean, it is the speed of response. So, you know, our vision is to get a lot more policy SLA, a lot more automation and technology support. And we've been quite successful in our sort of investment bids to the university, and they have, you know, seen the need. We've made the case, the business case, and we've got some investment coming our way to do a very fundamental inquiries piece across the university, and to invest in technology. But back to that name of system that will remain nameless, you know, that is challenging for us, because the lack of development ability, and the cost of that and the speed of that development ability, I think, is a challenge, and probably not the only people with that system that are experiencing those challenges. So we're working with the processes around it, but ultimately there does come a point where, if that's the comprehensive database, that's where you need to be making sure you can, you know, extract that data safely and robustly, that you can use that data for your predictive analysis, and that you can be sure that your communications coming from that data are absolutely, you know, spot on. And I think those are our challenges at the moment with our digital and tech in that specific part of admissions. I think the other areas that talk to those databases, we've got more control over. So, you know, we're good to develop our CRM systems around that, and of course our processes and how we do them. But ultimately that system is key to how we're going to actually flex and become much more agile and much more responsive, if that system's not fit for purpose. That's a bit contentious, so I'll stop there.
Can I just come in and talk about culture?
Please, Ika.
Is that all right? Just because we had, it's really been kind of quite timely this, because we had our first joint AOP away day with our admissions, so bringing together student marketing, recruitment and admissions colleagues for the first time to start interrogating the UAL strategy, aligning it with our student marketing, recruitment and admissions strategy, and thinking therefore what would be the new annual operating plan objectives for a converged team going forward once we come out of consultation and so on. And it was just so interesting seeing that culture shift start to happen as people start to feel, well, I'm part of a team where customer service, and it absolutely is already for our student marketing recruitment area, is, you know, they're all about the prospective student. They live it every day. They try and get into the heads of our prospective students and think about the content that they want to see. They try and reach them through campaign work. They try and make sure that their information needs are preempted, and if they're recruitment, they try and kind of take them through that journey, you know, through face-to-face and digital interaction. So that's already kind of there. But we've got an admissions team that has come from a completely different culture. I mean, we've touched on this already, from an academic registry kind of perspective, which has traditionally been about, you know, administrative kind of back office processes. So seeing that culture shift start to happen with people in the admissions team buying into that and saying, well, you know, things like, oh, we've got to stop saying no. And I just thought it was such an interesting thing to come, because that's the kind of stereotypical, I mean, it's no offense to anybody, that's just the culture that I mean, I came from a university administrative, that was my first job in HE, and I worked in an admissions office where we had paper forms, and, you know, it was just a totally different world. It was like 1993 or whatever, and you know, we had big boxes of applications, and it was just, when we get to it, we'll get to it. And, you know, I think it's just, the vision is around bringing that part of the service into the student experience culture, and that's absolutely a key element of so we've got a kind of knocking at an open door really institutionally, because our new Vice Chancellor has put much more of a spotlight in the strategy on the end-to-end student experience, and our part in that as an SMRA team now is, and that's what we were getting people to do earlier in the week, was think about how do we play our part in that, in improving that. So it's great to see people responding to that, and I think we can move to a point where I think we should be the voice of customer service in the institution. That's, as Helen says, we're being given responsibility, or Helen has, for a broader student inquiries project that will range across not just prospective students, but existing students as well. So we're in a great place to be able to lead that, and be the kind of ambassadors or the representatives for that, kind of banging that drum for the student view and the student needs. Yeah, we're going a bit off on one really, but I think that for me was just like, I start to see how this culture could change, and Helen's been instrumental in kind of bringing people together, and unfortunately couldn't join us on Tuesday, but it was, you know, it was the next step in that journey. We really start seeing the managers start to get on board with that, so it's all very exciting really.
I mean, that's wonderful to hear, Kath, and I think you're right, you know, having the vision and wanting to make change is kind of the easy bit in comparison to actually making the change happen and bringing your people along on that change too. And I think you just really nicely explained, you know, particularly in this sector, what some of those challenges are. And it's good to hear, Kath, that people are already responding really positively to that. Was change management always on the radar right from the very beginning, Kath? Was it something you felt quite strongly about?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've learned a huge amount since joining UAL, mainly from Helen, whose leadership is absolutely all about, you know, change, vision, how do we get there? And it's also, I think, from my perspective, I've also learned a huge amount during that time about how to empower staff in order to get them to be the change agents, in order to get them to be the ones. So we have a group of heads who are absolutely able to do that with their teams, and that's what we need in this department that we're now bringing together with ours. I mean, Helen, I'm sure you want to come in on this, but having people who can engage and motivate their staff in being able to deliver this change and bring them on board with it, and be the kind of leaders in that change is absolutely key. But we are now getting to the point where it's starting to move, I think. Helen, you probably want to come in on this because it's your kind of
yeah, we're kind of straying into performance management and management generally, but yeah, I mean, we're lucky we've got a good strong vision which supports student and customer service, so that's great. We've been able to hook our own recruitment, marketing and admissions objectives onto that very easily, so that's the starting point. We've got a shared vision, but yes, I think getting the right people in place to enable ultimately the implementation of that vision in a kind of operational way, it's translating the strategy into performance and operation is quite tricky. And you need, I think, quite a lot of experience, and you need the right people on board to cascade and travel that message and vision down through the ranks, because otherwise people are sort of sat thinking, this doesn't relate to me, I don't get it, you know. So empowering that vision is the job we have now at hand. And I think it just does take time, because I think people either don't have time for it, can't see the relevance or the importance of it, and absolutely can't see it, how it's relevant to them. So I think what we've been doing is a lot of away days and a lot of, trying to show people that this isn't some weird strategy that they don't, align to, and making them feel part of that. And that's the cultural shift. And I think once we get, we've been playing around with percentages, but I always think that once we get a sort of 60-70% swing on it, so enough people, then the whole, seesaw will swing the right way. And we're about maybe 50-60%, I think, at the moment. And we're working really hard to identify people who they're sort of hungry for this, they want the change. And they, maybe they're quite digitally and technologically savvy as well, and they can bring interesting things to the conversations. But change is key, and a lot of people still are really fearful, and they're just, I don't know why, they just feel that somehow they're going to be worse off, or it's going to be negative. And I think it's trying to share a vision of change which feels positive and doable, and not too scary and sort of negative. And I think that's what we're trying to do at the moment. So yeah, so far so good. We're getting there.
Helen, you had that strong vision. We've heard from Kath about the importance of change management and how you've seen that through. What was it about using external support that was important to you in terms of, initially scrutinising those kind of as-is processes?
Well, yeah, that's really interesting, because often, I sort of think of myself as the broken record. I'm always saying the same thing about, we got to do this, we got to do that. And often people will be like, well, maybe, that's just your view. Maybe I quite like doing it like this, actually, and I'm going to keep on doing it like this. And that's quite a tough one, especially when people are quite entrenched or perhaps very knowledgeable, which is perfectly acceptable. Bringing in a third party means that it's not necessarily me or Kath or, the internal view or the institutional or organisational view, and getting that external third party voice, I think quite often can unlock that problem. And I think we actually saw that quite demonstrably, didn't we, with yourselves, where we had people in the room sort of, fighting their corner to stay doing what they're doing, and then somebody saying, but, why not just think about it in a different way? And just because it's an external voice, I think it makes all the difference. So again, for us, that worked really well with your input into the teams. I think Kath and I stayed out of a lot of those conversations, didn't we? And we just let the teams have the conversation and have that really great discussion with you, let it all out, and then you reined it all back in for us, and that's great. So it felt less like we were top down again. Hierarchically, it's good to get that third party inside the organisation to say, we're not just saying this, actually a lot of other people in the sector believe this too, and here's some opinions. So it worked well for us, I think, that.
Great. And Melody, what is it about your superpowers that enable you to get stuff from people that maybe they hadn't been so forthcoming previously?
Oh, Janine, my superpower is you. I just sit in the session and watch you deliver expert sessions. I mean, there is something about being external and coming in as a you know, at the same place, right? We're just coming in to have a dig around. We're not coming in top down. We're not coming in to learn. We're coming in and just asking questions. And then, you know, there is an amount of creating trust with the people that you're working with. So there is some work that has to happen very early on to gather that trust. And some of that's about, you know, managing the groups, and some of that's about managing expectations, and some of that's about having a good relationship, you know, with the people that you're working with, and then really it's about helping them tease out some of their own operational challenges, and asking questions, right? Ask questions and say, okay, well, why are you doing it like this? And I'm just gonna play devil's advocate and, you know, ask you whether or not this is the right thing to do, and you develop a good relationship with the people, and if they trust you, they tell you the truth, and then you can create you know, opportunities for change and resolution out of it. I think that's key.
That nicely leads me on to ask Kath, how is understanding then what you did before your kind of as is state, how has that helped you to prioritize those changes and plan for the future? What insights have you gained from it, Kath?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that to see the way that you took that kind of massive qualitative information that was provided to you from, you know, a big group of staff over a number of days, and then synthesized it into an clear and objective list of areas that everybody pretty much was in agreement were the kind of pinch points for them, and then having you overlay that with kind of potential timelines, prioritization, distinguish whether it's a process or a system issue, and then give us a kind of bit of a roadmap about what we might want to do with this information in terms of next steps, has just been so helpful. And I don't think that if we've tried to do that ourselves, we could have done anything like it, because we just, as we talked about before, it's just really difficult for staff to get the time to carve out that time to do that work, but also to stand back from it and be neutral in the same way as you were able to. So I think that list of areas to prioritise has been invaluable. It's already informed a kind of short-term conversation with our systems team, where we've said, you know, we don't think these things are actually massively, you know, labour intensive in terms of development work. Can we look at what we've already got in the queue with you and see whether some of this could be added on to that? So that shorter term discussion is now going on. But also it enabled us to go to our kind of IT and digital colleagues who were formulating their strategic investment bids for the next budget year and say, hello, well, we've got a number of quite key needs that are business critical, actually. One of them being the applicant portal, another one being the application form and the way that works. I mean, it's pretty fundamental stuff. You know, this is the front end of the students' interaction with the university. We've talked about all the issues around brand and reputation. We all know what it's like when you directed to a system that's supposed to help you and then it doesn't actually give you the information that you need. It's so frustrating. And so having this evidence base enabled us to go and have our voice heard at that table, I suppose, and have those areas built into a broader plan, which then in turn a roadmap, which then, sorry, I've said it, and then it's given them more. It's, you know, it's just got our voice heard in that discussion, and I think we were almost forgotten, actually. So yeah. That was quite timely.
Thanks to that, I think as well, the other thing about working with you guys, I have to say this, and whether this was superpower kind of central, but the speed in which you turned around the amazing sessions was amazing, because we were on a really tight time scale. I mean, we kind of we bolstered this into our plan for this year, you know, because we knew we had to do it because it was timely with our consultation and restructure. But the speed in which you turned it around was phenomenal. So I think that really helped us. And it, again, for timing for budget and strategic investment calls, it's just all worked out quite well. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could probably do with a little bit more time and planning, but your ability to do that was quite phenomenal. So
I mean, Melody never sleeps, Ellen. So
can't you tell by the accent?
Melody, the roadmap and the kind of strategic planning element, I mean, yeah, it's your jam, right? why is that so important? How is that really helping clients?
Yeah, I mean, as Kath has said, right, so the way that you create a roadmap to deliver a vision or deliver a change or deliver whatever it is you need to change, have to be tangible, it have to be practical. HE has a real tendency to talk and be very conceptual and be very abstract, and that's partly because we're all, we're in education and that's what we do. But actually sometimes you just need a to-do list, and and I always approach these big transformation pieces or even small transformation pieces as what is practically doable, okay, and what is practically doable in maybe 0 to 3 months. What can we get done really quickly that is not a huge burden, that will make a really significant change to people's day-to-day practice? And some of that is about smoothing day-to-day business as usual activities. Some of that is about, let's put some stuff in place now to free up the staff so they can then attend to the transformation itself. So free up an SME, or so you don't need to backfill them because you can do something else with the activity. And then some of that's about that bigger stuff, and that some of that is about that art of the possible. What does the future state look like? What could you possibly do once you've got your foundations in place and you've done a bit of exploration and you've moved into sort of an innovation state, right, when you're a few years down the line? So I mean, this is totally my jam. I love this stuff. So, you start small, but you build on it and you have an idea of your vision. You know where you want to get to, you know the timescales, right? And that's what coming in and talking with the teams, understanding the challenges, really getting to grips with it, means that actually the plans and the roadmaps almost write themselves, because once you've mapped it out and you understand the landscape, you're like, okay, well, let's do this first, let's do this second, and let's put that there, but start thinking about it now, because we know it's a bigger project, right? If you want to change your SIS or implement a CRM or do a big change to your portal or something like that, they're slightly bigger projects. So yeah, it's key, isn't it? No change happens without really getting to grips with your transformation roadmaps.
As we come into the close of the hour, I just want to ask Helen and Kath about what's next, and then we'll come to the questions that we've got in our Q&A. So in terms of the work that you've been doing, Helen, it's of important day to day. What does the future look like for student recruitment, marketing and admissions now for UAL?
Well, yeah, I mean, what it looks like now is that we've got a whole load of work to do because we've now got roadmaps coming out of our ears. We've got strategic CRM developments, we've got roadmaps for student inquiries, we've got roadmaps for SITs and so on. But I mean, that's just the digital and tech side of things. I think there's a lot of work to do there, and I'm sure everyone's doing that on a continuous improvement basis. We all need to be anyway. I think for us, though, it's about getting the team motivated and getting the high performance out of the team that I know they can do, but they haven't had the chance to do. And I think that trying to alleviate them being so bogged down with the way they were working will be a real revelation. And for me, as a manager, as a leader, that's the key element, is getting the people, because it's people, process and system, right? It's the basic stuff. I think the people come first, and then we will continue to evolve the processes, and then alongside that will come great investment and development in the systems that we're using, and that's the basic kind of model that we're looking to drive, I suppose, in the next 2 or 3 years, and we've made a great start on that. I think we've done some good work on the process and some great work on the people. I mean, the structure is part of that too. And I'm hoping that once we embed and implement this new structure, we'll be able to see, and I think using the people and using their ideas, and getting them to say and to feel like they can say what's wrong and bring ideas to the party, and then get Equantiis back in to do the process maps for us. But getting someone external in and someone who's not going to make them redundant is all part of that people sort of management, isn't it, of getting the people to say the things that they clearly, they're experts, they're at the coalface and they know what needs to be done, but sometimes the culture stops them from speaking out. So I think getting them engaged, which I think we are feeling that's quite good, and then it will be definitely processes and systems alongside that. So we've probably got a 3-year plan. Got lots of 3-year plans at the moment, and we are embarking on quite an investment of online and thinking about some of the government agendas around LLE all that will happen with, you know, I think generally post-COVID, that the fact that we can deliver some good stuff online. I think universities are grappling with that at the moment. Some are doing great stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the private sector, the tech sector, is really stealing a march on that. So we've got a bit of an issue there. So we've got to get our back of house in order, and we've got to get our customer service top notch before we can deliver that strategy and compete, I think, with others in that space. So yeah, we've got a lot of work yes, to do. We've got a lot of roadmaps. So yeah.
Well, you mentioned the roadmap, and Kath mentioned the roadmap several times. I believe Kath's going to bed at night with the roadmap under her pillow. Is that right, Kath? You're dedicated. What's next for you, Kath? What are you focusing on now?
Oh no, you know, I don't want to just echo what Helen said, but absolutely, I think now it's this kind of cultural piece that I'm actually quite excited about it after, as you might have noticed, after the away day earlier in the week. It's I think the next stage for us is we've already had, as a student marketing recruitment team, from the culture side, I mean, the next step, we already had a kind of vision and values and staff reward and recognition piece that we did regularly in a team of around 25 people. And I think now it's like, okay, this is quite exciting now, because we get to develop what's the vision and values for a joined up student marketing recruitment and admissions function, where everyone feels a part of that. People don't just, I mean, we have had people say, you know, I say these things, I've said them lots of times, but no one listens and I'm still stuck doing, you know, that kind of thing. Can we win people's trust? Can we set a vision that they can buy into? Can we set some values that everyone can sign up to? And then can we start to recognize people who perform those values every day? And there are loads of people like that in the team, but, you know, for one reason or another, that kind of manual, labor intensive, you know, back officey kind of culture way of working means that they don't often get recognized for that, or don't get the scope to show what they can really do. We want it to make it a place where people want to work. And in tandem with that, I think if we can create that professionalized, high performing department, then I think our voice in the institution will be stronger. And that comes down to, again, can we be the ambassadors of student voice and of customer service in the institution? And I think reputation, it'd be great to see our admissions colleagues be a part of that. It just gives you so much clout to own that bit of the journey as well. And I think it'd be great to see the reputation, because there's always been a kind of bit of and since our previous kind of move towards centralisation, there's been a bit of a kind of negative view of that. So can we turn that around? Can we make it so that this team is highly collaborative, you know, well regarded, listened to, heard, has great relationships with internal stakeholders across professional and academic teams? That's what's, I'm not reading the roadmap at the minute, I'm reading vision and values pieces.
I just wanted to go to our Q&A as we come to our sort of closing minutes. Rob's mentioned about the opportunity around admissions reforms to work with UCAS and the 5 choices. And interestingly, he said here about, you know, a lot of resource spent on applications that will never turn into enrolment. And Melody and I spent a lot of time with your teams talking about the effort, administrative effort that goes into, you know, processing applications that actually don't materialise into an enrolment, and what we could do to impact that. Kath, just wondered if you had any further thoughts on Rob's comments there in the Q&A.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This is the problem. We were discussing this yesterday at this other event I was at. You know, when you've got this huge volume and so many of them are turning into rejections, how do we make this? How do we turn this around? How do we introduce some kind of filter whereby you're only really seeing the people that are likely to progress further down the funnel? I think that's a big question, and it comes back to this issue of how much can institutions control the kind of tap and the pipeline and the volume. I mean, obviously there's institutions in the US and elsewhere that ask for an application fee. You know, there's ways of controlling that funnel to make it more manageable, and that's something the UK sector has shied away from, has never done. And obviously, as noted, we've got this particular system around undergraduate applications, around UCAS, around the multiple, which is there for good reasons of applicant choice as well. And, you know, giving them the aspirational and the insurance and all that. But I totally agree, it's a challenge. I didn't actually know there was kind of scope for that discussion around the 5 choice. That's a new bit of information to me, so that's quite interesting.
Kath, we know Rob well. If you want, Rob and Kath, if you want to make contact after this this call, we're very happy to make that introduction. And then Helen, just finally, Mike's asking about student portal to help deliver information and other sort of delivery methods to kind of get information out to the customer, which student. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, there's multiple channels. You know, it's a multi-channel environment, and you know, it starts on social and you know, website first and foremost, and then it progresses through into, you know, students can apply via your website. So from inquiry through the whole journey to application and beyond, you know, there are multiple channels going on. I think the trick is to make sure that they're connected. You know, then there's email, and I think that it's easy to run away with the multi-channel environment, you know, and forget that, you know, people also have different needs at different parts of the journey. Sometimes they just need to phone somebody and talk to someone, but that can be, you know, very difficult. And sometimes they're more happy to sort of smash and grab and just get some information and take it away and then come back to you later on. So I think it's managing the different needs. I mean, certainly we've got an applicant portal, and it's very useful, but it only does one part of the journey for us, and it could never do all of it. But yeah, I mean, so it's a multi-channel world, and yeah, I mean, there's so much from just liking and commenting and responding on social to sending an email or making a telephone call and dealing with all of that. I heard, just to finish off, actually, I heard one of the best counselling sessions that a student had ever received was from an automated chatbot. No, it was a counselling avatar from an American university. And I thought, well, that's the way to go, right? So you all get these amazing. But apparently, that was the best advice they'd received, rather than talking to an actual person. So you know, there's hope for all of us yet, I'm sure, or not, depending on how your sort of preferences lie with digital and technology. But yeah, so it's you know, it's a world with a lot of choice, with a lot of different channels, and omni-channel, multi-channel. You know, we have to make sure that we are across all of them and structuring it well, I think, and joining things up. I think that's the challenge.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to bring our session to a close. Once again, Helen and Kath, thank you so much for being part of both the project and this fireside chat today. I'm sure it's been really interesting for people to hear, as I said earlier, your honesty and about, you know, the project that you face, and then how you worked through it and got the roadmap and the priorities for the future. So thank you again, and of course to Melody from our own Equantiis principal for being part of the fireside chat today. A copy of the recording will be shared shortly. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.